Welcome to the Probate Nation. Our goal each time you visit the Probate Nation is to inform, highlight, and educate you about the issues, challenges, and pitfalls you may face, whether you have assumed the awesome responsibility of managing the finances and care of an aging adult as a conservator or guardian in what we call the living probate, or you are probating the estate of a loved one who has passed away. Our show today focuses on the probate of an estate. When someone passes away, probate of an estate is the process to transfer the title or ownership of probate assets to the beneficiaries of the decedent. Not all assets are probate assets, and there are different types of probate, some simple, others more complicated. Like a journey on a slow-moving steam engine train, probate of an estate has a beginning, several stops along the way, and at the end of the trip, the balance of probate assets remaining are delivered to the decedent's beneficiaries. Some probate train rides are short, while other probates seem to never end. Our program today introduces you to the Frederick County Commissioner of Accounts, who oversees the probate of Frederick County estates. The Commissioner has oversight over and must approve many of your decisions in probate, from what you propose to pay or have already paid, to what you distribute to each beneficiary of the estate being probated. This program will identify steps to take and pitfalls to avoid, so you receive the Commissioner's necessary approval to continue on your probate journey. Our guest today is the Commissioner of Accounts for the Circuit Court of Frederick County, Virginia, a position he has held since January 1st, 2003. He also maintains a private law practice in Winchester with a focus on estate and trust administration, estate planning, and small corporations and limited liability companies. He graduated from the University of Virginia Law School, and during the course of his career served on the Virginia Bar Council from 1990 to 96, representing the 26th Judicial District. In 2016, he was admitted as a fellow of the Virginia Law Foundation. Please welcome Frederick County Commissioner of Accounts, Ben Butler. Hi, Ben.
Hello, Rich.
Thanks for coming by and visiting with us.
Thank you.
Well, you know, we started out by talking about the probate process and what that's all like. Tell us a little bit about, you know, the process in Virginia is kind of unique in comparison to other states. Tell us a little bit about it.
Well, I must say that our Commissioner of Accounts has just come out with a new newsletter called Commissioner's Corner. And with that, I found some history that I didn't really realize at the time, that actually this system that we now know here in 2017 was something that started back in 1849.
My goodness.
But it has changed somewhat since that time, in that back in the day in 1849, it seemed like the practice was you would pick a friend, neighbor, to serve as your Commissioner of Accounts. And so naturally, there were a lot of lawsuits that ensued after he approved your accounting and found out that he gave it to someone, allowed assets to be given to someone else. So the system has improved since that time. And finally, in the 1870s, the code was codified to have an attorney serve as a Commissioner of Account. And then it basically was under the supervision of each judge. So each jurisdiction, whether it be Frederick County or whether it be Richmond, Virginia, it had its own separate rules. Then finally in 1993, the Judicial Council, and that is the council of made up of judges throughout the state, came and appointed a standing committee for the Commissioner of Accounts. And that committee is basically what we recognize today, is that while I'm appointed by the judge of the Circuit Court of Frederick County, I really serve with others who are in the 26th Judicial Circuit, which is made up of the city of Winchester, Frederick County, Shenandoah County, Rockingham County, and Warren and Clark counties. And from that standpoint, we have continuity throughout our particular region of the state.
Awesome.
So that's where we are with that.
Which it really is unique. Let's talk a little bit about the role of the Commissioner of Accounts. What are the duties and responsibilities of the Commissioner of Accounts?
Well, the role and the duty of the Commissioner of Accounts is basically to serve as a policeman for the Circuit Court judge. It is to see that the laws are enforced, and that's principally our job. For instance, and we'll talk about this later, about the inventory and the accounting. that are filed by these fiduciaries. That is what we make sure that are timely filed. The judge of the circuit court, of course, is busy with criminal cases, civil cases, and this just takes a load off his back.
Sure. Now, what is the volume of cases that are being handled by your office, and how are you staffed to support that?
Well, we handle about 500 accounts a year. More in the past when foreclosures were taking place, because we also have the duty to oversee trustees where foreclosures taking place. But by and large, 500 is the general number of estates and guardians and conservatories that we have a year. And in that, I have 2 part-time employees that work along with me, which include one that's responsible for the auditing. I also assist in the auditing of these accounts, but her principal duty is an auditor, and then I have another one that takes care of setting up the accounts.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. Now, when somebody becomes qualified as a personal representative, whether an executor or administrator, is there any information or materials that are given to them?
Absolutely. Through my clerk, we have developed a handout. And my clerk, I will say, with some editing by myself, because I don't want it to appear to be lawyerese, that technical language appearing. So she has written up a general outline. It's about 7 pages long, double spaced, so that there's no excuse. It doesn't have a lot of quote legal words in it that you would have to go to the dictionary and look up. But basically, it's a guide to tell people what to do. And the undercurrent of all of that is, if you don't know what you're doing, seek help.
Sure. Now, the clerk you refer to is the clerk of the circuit court?
Yes, that's a clerk, Rebecca Hogan, who's a longtime clerk at Frederick County and is quite knowledgeable.
Okay, and we show on the screen the first page of that particular memorandum, which has an introduction and shows a table of contents. And so this is a very good roadmap about things that need to be done.
Yes,
and as you say, it's been written in very sort of layman's language for folks.
And it's very general. It's very general, but to give them an idea.
Yeah, it's an awesome work, I think. After somebody qualifies as an executor, what are some of the very first steps that they need to take in order to get things going in the right direction?
Well, the first thing that a personal representative needs to understand is that it's not a marathon and it's not a foot race. In other words, you take the time necessary to get it done, but you don't belabor the point. And so I tell them, you have basically these duties. Number 1, you need to pay the taxes of the decedent. Number 2, you need to pay their debts. Number 3, you make distribution of the estate. You don't see how long you can keep the estate open, but on the other hand, you don't make it in such a short period of time that the creditors are out there looking for their money.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So they need to secure the assets, I guess. How about tax identification numbers? Need to go get one of those, maybe?
Exactly. The first thing that they have to do is secure the assets. They have to ascertain, well, what do they have? Because once they take that oath, they are responsible. They, the personal representative, are responsible for everything that's in that estate. Mm-hmm. So they step into the shoes of the decedent. You want to make sure that you have secured it in some way or fashion. Generally speaking, the first trip that they make is to a bank to turn a bank account into the estate account, but you can't take the person's personal account and just call it the estate account. You have to set up a brand new account. Now, the banks help you in this. They will get you the federal identification number, which is equivalent to an individual having a Social Security number.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
But the banks help you through that, and that's the first thing that you need to do.
That's very good advice. Let's turn to the estate inventory and accountings. A critically important role of your office is to oversee, audit, and approve accountings. But how does that process work? How do we start even before we get to the accounting, what's the first thing we got to file with you?
Within 4 months from the time of qualification, an inventory of the estate has to be filed. And this inventory is so important because it is actually the base that all other documents will be based upon. And so that is where, if a personal representative gets off to on the wrong foot, that's where they're going to have problems all the way through. It identifies the personal property in Part 1. In Part 2, it identifies those accounts, bank accounts that are with joint names with right of survivorship, and listing the names. They invariably, 50% of the people that file those fail to list the survivor's name. They'll give me all the account numbers, complete with full digits, which I have to redact, so that, because all this is digitized and put on public record. But that is a common mistake, and we'll touch on that in a moment. But then Part 3 is where you get into the real estate that was owned, and then parts 4 and 5 just speak to other real estate matters which are outside of the state of Virginia.
Okay. So we have the building block, which is that inventory, which is submitted. Now, they don't really have to submit anything to support the values that they actually submit on the inventory. Is that right?
That is correct. Virginia operates really on the honor system. They trust you that you're going to be, if you take that oath, that you're going to be honest and put the fair market value in as you see fit.
Okay. Now, of course, the next thing is, after a period of time, we have to do what they call an accounting to you. We have to show all the income we've received and the expense that we disperse and so on. And there's a very specific way that has to be presented. What kind of documentation and support do we have to submit to support that accounting?
Well, the code requires you to provide vouchers for each one of the disbursements that you're making. And those are disbursements as opposed to, and this is what a lot of the personal representatives get mixed up on. There's a difference between a disbursement, which is for debts, payment of debts, and a distribution, which goes to beneficiaries.
Okay.
They seem to get confused over those two words. But nevertheless, they have to have vouchers. We prefer that they give us copies of canceled checks, but in this day and age, an electronic age, very few of these banks are doing that. So you have to bend with the times, and we do insist on a bank statement coming in, and we do have to try to identify each item on the bank statement and match it up against what is alleged to have been spent.
Okay. Well, based on your your many years of experience as a commissioner, do you have any particular tips for people on filing an estate account?
Yes, on the filing of the account, if they would just read the instructions. The instructions are spelled out right on the accounting. And what it says, for instance, on line 1, it says the amount you listed on the inventory. On the accountings that I get in, probably a good 25-30%, it's a number that has never been known. It's a number that has never shown up anyplace. If they look at the instructions that are right on the form, it says, list what you put on the inventory. They don't. And so we have to send it back to them. Of course, that's your start. And if you didn't have the right number there, then you're not going to end up with the right number at the end.
Okay.
So that's one thing that they need to do. They also need to go back, and in many wills, you will see where a bequest is made of, whether it be a diamond ring or a car or something of that nature. If the will does say that, then on your inventory, list that item so that we can identify that it went out and separate that out from the rest of the personal property, for instance. The real estate they're a little bit better on, but that's one of my pet peeves, is that they don't list those bequests, and that poses a problem on the accounting. But if they'll just see, they'll give me a nice spreadsheet on what they've spent, but they haven't itemized the items on, say, item number 7, it says, give me an itemized list of what were the disbursements.
Okay.
So
line by line.
Line by line.
Check numbered 1 through 20.
Yes.
Just tell you. And okay, so what is I think you've touched on this. What is the most common reason an account is not approved by your office?
The most common problem is that it frankly just doesn't add up. The lines, there are 2 lines on there. I believe they're 5 and 10 at the bottom. If 5 and 10 have to equal, they have to be, the amount coming in and the amount going out has got to be equal so that there's 0 in the bottom. Many times I get them in and they don't equal. And they submit them anyway. I guess they think that they're just going to try to bluff it through, but that is a common problem that we see.
Now you mentioned, and this is something that's very, very special, I think, that your office does, and that's something you suggested about submitting a draft of the account. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Okay. What we do is there is a form that we send out early in the administration, and what that form basically says is that a statement by the personal representative that they have paid all known taxes that are due. And right down at the underneath the signature, or right above the signature line on that form that we require, is submit your email address. With that email address, then we can communicate with the personal representative. And what we ask them to do is we ask them to email me a draft of the will without the attachments. Just give me the basic form, the first 1 page, because that accounting is 1 page, and any of the itemized sheets. Send that to me. Let me look at it first, and then I'll tell you if there's anything wrong, because otherwise you can get caught up in this paper of going back and forth trying to determine, what is correct. And it's just a whole lot quicker, more efficient, and I think the people appreciate that fact, using emails to communicate.
I think that was one of the most very special thing that I learned in connection with preparing for this show and talking with you. So, I mean, your thing is get that initial draft of the accounting together, your first accounting. If you're having problems, go ahead and email it in with what you have, and sometimes you can figure out what's going on because you've been doing it for so many years.
Absolutely.
And get them
Yes.
at least point them where they need to go look for the problem.
Right, exactly.
So I think that's a very, very important service. Well, one of your roles, like you mentioned, is again, one of the obligations of the executors, of course, is to take care of paying the creditors. Okay, so how does your office get involved in helping protect creditors of the estate?
All right, well, Virginia has set up something which is called a proof of claim.
Okay.
And there is not a prescribed form as such. There is a designated filing fee that you must file. I think it's now, just recently, July the 1st, is $55. But you have to set forth what that claim is. We note that claim in red on the outside jacket of the file and inside jacket of the file, because what that tells me, if there's a proof of claim filed, I will not approve that accounting until there's been some sort of an accounting on that proof of claim having been paid, somehow dismissed, any way that it goes. Now, on an insolvent estate, then you do get into the situation where, and that's where it really becomes interesting. The insolvent estates, not everybody gets all the money. It's not first come, first serve. It is done in a series of 10 classes that are there. And so one of the things that we encourage, obviously we encourage it in many estates, particularly if someone is not related in this sense, if they weren't the power of attorney for the person that they're serving as the executor, we encourage a debts and demands hearing.
Sure.
And a debts and demands hearing is where it's published in the newspaper that on such a date I will take proof of debts and demands. And for the executor to clear itself on any questionable accounts that have been filed or that they're supposed to be paid, they will have that hearing, and we will swear them in, and we will ascertain what assets are in the estate, who's gotten paid, and then I file a report that reports to the court each of the debts, how they're classified. Now, many lawyers don't realize this, but there's a second step. The second step is not my hearing and not my report, but they then have to get an order from the circuit court called a show cause to distribute on the basis of my report. And that's the second half.
And I think that's very important to bring out because our creditors have to file their claims. Again, if we do have a situation where there's more debts than there are assets, then I know you encourage administrators and executives to proceed very cautiously and do not make any distributions or pay anybody until you work through who are the creditors and then have that debts and demands hearing and let you issue the report that says who's in what class, because not everybody necessarily going to get paid 100%.
Well, a chief problem with that is that on an insolvent estate, if the executor pays the funeral home the $12,000,
oh my God,
and they're limited under the statute $4,000, then that other $8,000 is going to come out of that executor's personal pocket.
And we talked about that in another show about paying funeral expenses, and you're apt to go ahead and pay that or advance those on behalf of thinking you're going to get reimbursed, and then the estate doesn't have enough money. And you might get reimbursed, but maybe not for every dollar, because
That's
you
right.
might be getting a prorated amount down in the 9th, 10th category.
Yes.
But I think that's something, but I think you're right. You need to walk through all those steps, and then of course make sure in insolvent estate you get that order of distribution entered by the court. That's your get out of jail free card as an executor to protect yourself.
Yes.
You definitely want to take advantage of that. Well, this is a very, very interesting topic. Obviously, both yourself and myself, you've been doing this for many, many years. Does a fiduciary need to hire an attorney or a CPA to help them get through all these details?
Well, as in so many things, it all depends on how complex the assets of the estate of the decedent would be, and frankly, what sort of debts did the decedent have. So each one of them sort of speak to itself as to whether or not you need to seek help. But the important thing is, and what I try to emphasize to these personal representatives is, if it is that situation where they really, after reading the instructions and after our general instructions from the Commissioner of Accounts office, if they still are uncertain, they need to go out and hire either a CPA or an attorney to help them, because those are reasonable expenses, are paid out of the estate, not paid out of the pocket of the personal representative.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Will, do you have any final thoughts, recommendations that you would want to share with our viewers about the Frederick County Commissioner of Accounts office and how you folks, fulfill your obligations to the community?
Yes, well, they're just matters that I would like to address are some of the complaints that I have on inventories and on accountings. And some of the problems you get is when people file inventories, they don't pay attention to the form, and they might list an item and never add up a total. And as the Commissioner of Accounts, when I get that form in there and the totals are all blank, I can't fill it in. It's not for me to do.
Oh, really?
So I would say to them, would you please, again, read the instructions. When people call me up a question, I said, have you read the instructions? Oh, yes, I've read those instructions, and I just couldn't understand them. I said, well, tell you what, if you will read them again tonight and then read them once again tomorrow, and if you still can't answer the question, you email me the question, because what that does is that makes them sit down to formulate that email to me in the form of a question. That makes them formulate that question in their mind.
Sure.
So that's what I would suggest that they do.
Okay, excellent. Well, I want to thank you, Ben, for taking the time and coming and visiting with us.
Well,
I mean, I think you just great information, and you perform a great public service for the community in Frederick County, and we thank you for that time you spent today with us.
Well, Richard, one of the things I would have to say is that the Conference of the Commissioner of Accounts is a body of commissioners all over the state of Virginia, And it's a group that helps one another. We have a web page that is just for the Commissioner of Accounts, and there are questions shared throughout the Commissioner of Accounts, and people give responses to it. And so it's a wealth of information. It's like having 200 attorneys in your law firm. So yeah, you can always get an answer.
So the commissioners always have a great resource to turn to.
Yes, we do.
That's fantastic. Well, what I take away from our visit with Commissioner of Accounts Ben Butler is that if problems arise in the probate of an estate, as they will from time to time, do not hesitate to lean on them for assistance. Moreover, they encourage the use of email to communicate with them. And if you are having problems with an accounting, which many executors do, you are encouraged to shoot Mr. Butler an email with a draft of your estate account, and he will see if he can figure out where the problem is and point you in the right direction to resolve it so you can get back on track. That is something very special and so helpful. In short, Ben and his staff are easy to work with and very proactive in mentoring executors and bringing folks together to resolve differences so the probate of an estate is administered properly and hopefully closed promptly. They perform a great public service for the Frederick County community, and we are thankful for their commitment in doing so. This brings us to the conclusion of our show. We hope you found it helpful. Replays of this show and all the shows broadcast to date, along with other helpful information, can be viewed on the Probate Nation website. On behalf of the Probate Nation, thank you for visiting with us.